do. Without further ado, let me allow the Taxi Alliance to put us in the picture in terms of this matter that I've put on the table. Over to you, SG or President.
Thank you, Chairperson. Can you hear me now?
I can not only hear you, I can also see you, President.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Deputy President of the NTA, members of the Executive Committee of the NTA, Hlaloga Portfolio Committee, and honorable members of this Portfolio Committee on Public Transport. Indeed, it is an honor and a privilege for us to have been invited by yourselves this evening to share with you the plight, the frustrations, and all that is affecting the taxi industry. The advent of COVID-19 in the Republic of South Africa created a very unique situation that required support from the general public and everybody in order to harness the danger that was engulfing this country. I need to admit that we are aware that level 1 of lockdown was proclaimed by the state president during his declaration of the state of disaster. We were, however, concerned at that stage because we had not met the minister since he was appointed to his position. We even went out on media, laid our complaints and facts bare that indeed he was absent and missing in action. However, after that press conference, the minister did surface. We met the minister, and of course, he apologized, and we accepted. And from there onwards, we established rapport, and to date, we are still engaging the minister on various issues in this matter, and there is this general understanding between ourselves and the minister. And I can publicly declare and inform your good selves today that he even visited several taxi ranks together with members of this leadership that you have with yourselves today. However, to cut the long story short, the total shutdown had a very serious effect on and knock-on effect on the taxi industry, in that during the level 5, taxis did not operate. Only a very few of them, close to 10%, I suppose, carried essential workers to and from work, and they operated during the very limited hours. And at that stage, initially, they carried 50% of their loading capacity. A little later, they were allowed to carry 70% of their loading capacity. And in a 15-passenger combi, which is a 15+1, these taxis only carried 9 passengers, 10 including the driver. And you can imagine the shortfall that the taxi industry had incurred. up until now. To this end, we have continued to engage in a very honest and sincere way the minister and his department. And recently we have placed before the minister, that was after he had publicly informed us of the relief fund, which in our view, of course, very minimalistic. I need to inform you, Sihlalo, and your committee, that taxis, your 15-passenger taxi, installments rank from 15,000 to 13,000 per month. You can just imagine the shortfall and the arrears during the first 3 months. And we appreciate that payment holiday has now lapsed. And we had approached the minister, presented before him that we feel and think that it is high time now that the loading capacity of our taxis be restored. We had based our argument precisely on the advice and counsel, not only of the World Health Organization, but of our own National Corona Command Council. I need to remind you, Sihlalo, that putting on a mask specifically was intended for situations where social distancing is impossible, according to the World Health Organization. That was the intended purpose of us wearing masks, in order to mitigate in circumstances where social distancing is impossible. This messaging was very clear for all of us to understand, and it is still resonating with everybody. Of course, though there are those who still do not honor this message. And I need to indicate that the message and the instruction or the regulation is peremptory. Nobody has an option. We all must obey and abide by. And any other regulation and law is as good as it is enforceable. So we pleaded that the loading capacity be restored on those bases. And we posed this question, that there are 2 combis. One is a 15-passenger taxi carrying 70% loading capacity. Another is still a 15-passenger loading capacity vehicle carrying 100% loading capacity. We posed a question: what is the rate of infection in each scenario? Science has not responded to that. Even those who argue against the 100% are unable to provide proof of any scientific opinion on this matter. Of course, we understand the issue around your patient 0 in China, who had infected so many people. And we need to understand that patient 0 was able, precisely because there were no mitigating factors and mitigating protocols and procedures then. That is how this virus had spread. And we also pleaded that the long-distance taxi operation should resume. That is our intra-provincial, inter-provincial, as well as your cross border. However, we presented this to the minister, and he promised that he was going back to the portfolio, rather to NCCC to place our prayer. And of course, I need to admit that in all of these, we were in agreement with the minister. He was very sympathetic. And of course, we had a very long period waiting for a pronouncement by NCCC on this matter. Recently, of course, the minister came back to us. He reported that despite our displeasure, one, at the relief fund, government, the treasury has no funds available to set aside in order to add on to this one. Secondly, he also reported back to us that cross-border operation, opening up of borders, that one was outrightly defeated at NCCC simply because the country would not cope with the influx of foreign citizens with COVID-19 in terms of UN protocols and treaties, because government will have to provide those services for them. So recently we've had meetings, around about 4 of the recent meetings we've held with the minister. The first one recently was on the 17th of June, when he had to come and report back to us on our submissions. And the report that the minister and his department presented was that NCCC found it in its wisdom and resolved that the public transport matter should not be looked in isolation. It must be looked together with other matters on the same day, so that time allocated is not split. Of course, on Monday, again, 29th of June, 2020, we met with the minister, and he reported to us that the DG was at net joints and that the matter and issues we have presented are receiving attention. And the Honorable Minister reported back that he will report back sooner rather than later. Again on Thursday, 2nd of July, we did meet with the minister. And of course, he informed us that during the National Corona Command Council meeting, a letter came up from a college of medicine in South Africa, where the College of Medicine expressed its concerns on the 100% loading capacity. Consequently, a 2-person committee was appointed by NCCC. This 2-person committee was composed of both the Ministers of Transport, Ndadefikile Mbalula, and Dr. Zweli Mkhize, to come and meet the taxi industry and discuss the concerns raised, look at the protocols to mitigate the concerns raised. This was done and completed. And finally, on Saturday, the 4th of July, 2020, the NTA National Executive Committee met the ministers, Fikile Mbalula and Dr. Zweli Mkhize, National Department of Transport and National Department of Health, respectively, and their entourage. They were also accompanied by, amongst others, Professor Karim, the COVID-19 Ministerial Advisory Committee. A PowerPoint presentation was made. We engaged the issues raised. The 2-person committee was to take the agreement that we had reached, especially the protocols to mitigate the concerns raised by the College of Medicine. So this had gone back to NCCC. The NTA felt after that engagement that it had presented a very compelling argument. We are, as a result, looking forward to a positive response. Upon receipt of your invitation, which we are honoring this evening by being here, I looked at it and studied it. It referred to an impasse. And I looked at my vocabulary, and it says an impasse is a situation in which no progress is possible, especially because of disagreement. I also looked at a word deadlock, which is defined as a situation typically one involving opposing parties, in which no progress can be made. Then I also looked at a word dispute, and the dictionary says that it is an agreement or a disagreement or argument, that is to express a disagreement. The NTA takes the following position. Because National Corona Command Council has not pronounced itself on the matter and issues that we have presented before it, we have not made any pronouncement. Consequently, the NTA will pronounce itself after finality has been reached by the National Corona Command Council. We do, however, as lawful citizens, reserve the right to pursue all legal avenues possible in case we feel aggrieved. I want to publicly declare today that at no stage will NTA agitate disobedience. At no stage will NTA promote insurrection and sabotage. At no stage will we take any position and make any pronouncement until the minister has reported back to us on the progress and otherwise of it. I must sincerely and honestly appeal to your good sense of judgment and honesty to help the taxi industry in this matter. Because if we are to be expected to operate at 70%, it is good as declaring the taxi industry dead and opening up for the highness to come on a feeding frenzy to finish off the dead carcass of the taxi industry. I believe it is not in the interest of South Africa to kill your prime public transport mover responsible for nearly 70% of the commuting public in the country. A prime public transport mover, which you have since the advent of democracy, not recognized and subsidized. Of course, this situation precedes democracy. We faced a similar situation during the previous apartheid regime, and we have continued as citizens and as patriots to transport the communities in which we live. This is a trade that we have chosen for ourselves. And this is what we have. And this is the only trade that we are prepared to pursue and continue. You can imagine, Sihlalo, ukuthi in every trip where the cost is 10 rand, paid to both the subsidized mode and the non-subsidized mode, that trip in essence costs 20 rand. Public transport subsidy gives the other 10 rand to the subsidized mode at the expense of the taxi industry. So we have been providing a social service. We have subsidized the majority of citizens in this country. To them and before their eyes, we are a government that provides for their needs. Let me also indicate that our role in this country is creative nation building. I am sure that what I have presented tonight depicts who the National Taxi Alliance is. In spite of all that it is faced with, we are resolute. We are committed in supporting every endeavor and effort to help South Africa get out of the morass it finds itself in. We are committed to this country. We do not come from any other planet but this one. We know of no other country but this one. We know of no parliament and government but this one. And let us preserve the trust that the public has in us as government and as public transport. Let us together preserve the goodwill that the public continues to demonstrate and to show towards us and towards government. And it is no sin for the commuting public in this country to have selected and chosen the public transport mode number one that they feel works for them as the taxi industry. They are supporting the taxi industry with their feet. The percentages of how much we carry are sufficient testimony to that effect. So today, we are pleased to have been invited by not just the portfolio committee, but by men and women who were chosen and called upon by God to rule over a nation. And we as subjects have nowhere to run to other than to come back to you. That is why unreservedly we acknowledge and we undertook that we are going to take these steps to come and meet your good selves and present our case. And our struggle continues until such time that the very least of us is free and economically viable. We are not going to relent. And in the final analysis, I have said and continue to insist that considering the health consideration presented by a College of Medicines in South Africa is a very good thing. It is critical. However, there are also economic as well as social interests. So these must be balanced out. So it is our view that a pragmatic approach towards resolving this issue is critical. And it is our appeal today to your good selves. We feel and trust that we have met the people who matter today, people who will support the minister in pleading our case. I must indicate that I am one man who listens with his ears on the ground and with his eyes wide open. I respect people, even those who are younger than I am. I am sure I am twice your age, some of you. But however, because you were chosen by God to lead me, I have got to demonstrate that I support and respect your good offices. Therefore, it is this type of a balance that I wish we would all strike for the good of all of us. So with these few words, let me thank you very much. Initially, I was rather expecting that I will receive a presentation from your good self. But however, now that I had to take the responsibility of putting before you my submission and our submission to the minister, I am glad to do so. And I cannot, as president of the NTA, on behalf of and for the people, the men and women I lead, pronounce on a decision that has not been made. Otherwise, I would be negotiating in bad faith, which is who I am not. So with these few words, Hlalo, I wish to retreat and hold my beat. Thank you for offering me this opportunity as president of NTA to meet and to share with your good selves these frustrations that are facing us. Thank you so much.
Well said, President. I'm sure I'm part of those who may be younger than you twice, as you have said. And I appreciate the fact that you give respect to the fact that we are elected and we are here. Thank you very much. And thanks for the presentation, detailed as it is. Let me allow, maybe let me just test before I allow honorable members to ask whatever questions, contributions. Are you done on your side, President? Is there no one who wish to add so that tomorrow we're not seen as people who are not democratic?
Thank you, Nkosi Yami. Slalo. The NTA is done and its submission is as presented. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, honorable members. I now can take hands. Let me hear who wants to contribute on this. Honorable McDonald.
Chris Hunsinger.
Honorable Chris Hunsinger.
Ketamabala Skole.
Usekafikile mfoka Mondise.
Tami Mokena.
Masithokoze Mhlonishwa. Who else?
Nondando Noluchungu. Luchungu.
Mamu Noluchungu. Where's Honorable May today? The month was started.
Chair, Mr. May is struggling with his sound. As soon as that is sorted out, he'll join the meeting.
Okay, sure. Any taker? Okay, let's.
Before that, Honorable Ramadwa.
Honorable Ramadwa. All right. Let's take this first round. Honorable McD, followed by Honorable Hunsinger.
Thank you, Chair Mangete. Thank you to the President and his representatives from the National Taxi Alliance. A luta continua comes up to me because I think the struggle is real for you. It's been a very difficult time during this COVID. I have a couple of questions and a couple of comments. The first one is on the PPE. Has the Alliance received any PPE from the department or any other government department or municipality? And how much of the PPE did you receive? Have any of your taxi drivers been diagnosed with COVID? And then, you know, if the NTA was formalized or the taxi industry was formalized, it would have been so much easier to have just claimed a big portion of this money from the TERS fund for the drivers, because that would have alleviated a big problem for the taxi owners. But as it may, at the moment it is not formalized. So I would like to know if any attempts have been made to claim from the TERS fund for the drivers currently. And then I also would like to thank the Taxi Association for not agitating and for not being disobedient in the load figures that was given by the NCC, and I applaud them for that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Honorable Ansinger.
Thank you, Chairperson. And from my side, thank you very much for the presentation, but also for this opportunity to engage. It sincerely is an appreciated one. Thank you for the kind words, which speaks of the necessity to work together. And certainly we are in challenging times, and we obviously need to work together, but it is not always an obvious thing. And certainly, as you mentioned, the words of controversy and contradiction in terms of working together, the ones that you've looked up to get further understanding of the content, that certainly is always the looming threat around this willingness to rather want to work together than to want to have catch-22s and all sorts of stuck situation. But let us not be taken up by the engagement other than also to consider our commuters, because from government side and from a service provider side, both have the objective in providing a particular service, and in this case the service of public transport. And let me then also recognize the fact that you as a taxi fraternity drive in excess of 90 billion kilometers per year. And Chairperson, that is something like 25,000 trips to the moon and back. So let us also recognize the huge contribution of the taxi feature in our public transport sector. 300,000 of them, which, as rightfully has been mentioned, is 75% of everything that we understand about getting to work and getting to school and getting to universities. So there's great appreciation for what you've done. I think if it wasn't for the taxis looking at other sectors of transport, then there wouldn't have been a public transport sector. So huge appreciation for the taxi fraternity. But now we get to the engagement in terms of the portfolio committee and you as an organization. And you mentioned in particular that the World Health Organization, a particular document informed your decision to then enter into a phase where you, out of your own, declare 100% capacity, passenger capacity, rather than to adhere to the current legislative requirement of a far lesser capacity. And you've been playing around with this in that there's been initial suggestions of 50%, you demanded and pushed for 70%. But in particular, you now mentioned of the World Health Organization, which informed your decision upon a particular report. Now, while you were speaking, I scanned through the health reports that was issued by the World Health Organization, and I would like to get confirmation what particular document you are speaking of. The only information I could gather while you were speaking was the one speaking about wearing masks and social distancing that would not be mentioned in the World Health Organization's document because it speaks of physical distancing. Nevertheless, if you could please give us particular detail of the particular report, since there are other sectors that also would want further information based on scientific fact. But in scanning through the document, which talks about masks and physical distancing, which is mentioned as the advice on the use of masks in the context of COVID-19, that is the title of the document of the World Health Organization. 16 references in that document is made of physical distancing, but nowhere, even in the table, which is marked as table 2 on page 7, there is a strong indication that both of these measures is regarded as a requirement to effectively deal with COVID-19. Nowhere in this document could I find anything that suggests in wearing a mask, physical distancing can be ignored, unless you would be so kind to show that to the committee. Further conversation alludes to suggestions of formalization, and I'm sure that this has been brought into many conversations that you've had dealings with our minister. And I would like to just ask, Chair, through you, what ideas do you have around formalization? Is this fertile ground? Is it something that you have pondered upon in terms of possibility and content? And if so, what would these formalization ideas from your side suggest and be? Furthermore, there's a huge concern around labor and employment conditions, especially of the drivers. We also know of other sectors, rank managers and guards, as we know them in Cape Town. But then it's high time that minimum standards of employment should really be considered. What are your ideas around that? Then having you as our guests, but then also under our very important function and role of doing effective oversight, I now have the opportunity to then also ask you around the Department of Transport's annual in excess now of 25 billion rand, which is given from the budget to you. And what have you done, with that? Because we hardly ever get the opportunity then to hear what you've done with this 25 million, which is annually given to you as a taxi fraternity. And then also there's been issues around taxi fare increases. And what procedures do you follow when considering taxi increases? What consideration do you take, or do you just simply decide on increasing taxis? I know, for instance, that a trip from Soweto to Joburg, which is about 23 kilometers, a taxi on average last year was something like 16 rands, whereas a train fare was 9 rand 50 and a bus would cost 17 rand 80, which is a rather wide scope in variance. If you could also then lastly comment on the whole issue around panel van conversions into taxis, since my understanding is that we have in excess of 10,000 illegal converted panel vans into taxis. And then finally, Chair, if any consideration in terms of moving into future with technology, etc., what have you done and explored around e-hailing as part of the offering to make it possible for someone to simply go on a cell phone and get a taxi interested in his or her need to travel to somewhere. Thank you, Chair, and again, thank you to the delegation.
Thank you, Honorable Hunsinger. Mondays,
Baba.
Kosenkulu.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. First of all, I want to appreciate this kind of engagement with the National Taxi Alliance. And I'm welcoming the presentation by the taxi leadership. And we recognize that this industry is the only industry that is been run by blacks. And it is the only industry that was established by our own. When you speak, when the president speak, it shows that there's some lot of suggestion that they have put forward to our minister for consideration and the NCC. I think that chairperson is allowing us to listen carefully to what will be the outcome of that submission to the minister and the NCC. But chairperson, I'm worried, chairperson, if they can actually make us understand the impact that will cause by the 100% loading, because I think 70%. One day I tried to be in a taxi to see what is the impact of that 70%. Actually, there's a space when you're talking about 70%. I'm trying to check that this 100%, especially when you are going from province to province, because it is very conducive. If they can give us some idea what is their thinking around that. Chairperson, there is one question that I want to ask from the industry. The first question is that one: how do they feel if the parliament do subsidize the commuters, as it happened in the metro rail and bus industry? If that one can be clarified by them and tell us what is their intake on that one, chairperson. And the last one, chairperson, is that one of the formalizations of the taxes. How do they take that one? Because if they can give us an idea, because I think as a portfolio committee, we are part of them. We are trying by all means. That's why the chairperson called this meeting actually to help them, because we need to understand their thinking, we need to understand their frustration, we need to know what is their vision and their mission. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Siyabonga Mondise. Masithokoze Mhlonishwa.
No, angithokoze khulu Sihlalo, ngithokoze ithuba engilithola kukomiti ngilotshise nabakhambeli bethu abavela ku-National Taxi Alliance. Chairperson, I must declare firsthand that, you know, I was raised by a father who had a taxi business. So I'm a product of the taxi business. And these men and women who are here, Mama and Baba, I respect them very much. I know the contribution that the taxi industry is making. I know that there's many Tamimapenas around the country which were raised and nurtured by the taxi industry, and that we truly respect the taxi industry and the contribution that they make into the overall economy. And we further acknowledge that the taxi industry remains a key economic driver for the economy, with over 60% of commuters opting to use the taxi as a mode of transport or as a mode of transport of choice. And that we further are with them, and we truly understand from the statement of the president what he has said. Furthermore, Chair, as a committee, we are a portfolio committee that needs to play an oversight over the executive. And therefore, these are stakeholders. As such, we will engage with you in that capacity, that you remain stakeholders, very important stakeholders for this portfolio committee, but also for the industry as a whole. So I think when we engage with you, the objective is not to create a situation of us and them, but it's an opportunity for us to get clarity on some of the questions which we would have had in the past, which were not clarified. And what better to have those clarities given by actual people that are here. I think the first question, Chairperson, that I would pose is
okay. Valerie, there is somebody troubling this meeting.
Yes, Chair, I am muting the people who are troubling right now.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Mphathiswa, Qhubeka.
Hey, Chairperson, you are giving me a promotion. You are saying I'm a minister. Mphathiswa means minister.
I'm saying Mhlonishwa. Qhubeka Mhlonishwa. Maybe one day ngizokubiza ngomphathiswa, who knows.
I'm glad that this meeting is recorded, Chair, so that they can say once I was a minister for 5 minutes. Anyway, thank you so much. I think to the President, thank you so much for the statement that you read to us. But I think within, as I said, I'm a product of the taxi industry, and I think some of the questions will be pointed questions. I know for a fact that my family or my father, the business that he had was not registered. And that is a fact, because our driver or the drivers that we had over the years, none of them could claim from the UIF if any of them were to be dismissed. And that presents itself as a big, not only that, but when we went and bought a new taxi, my father could not really afford to get a loan from the financial institutions, and we had to pay SA Taxi Finance, where he was given a hefty interest rate of about 30%. And precisely that was because the business was not formalized. Now, how many taxi owners within the within the NTA, National Taxi Alliance, have registered themselves as a business and treat themselves as such? This question specifically means how many of you have registered a business and that you are also paying tax. Yes, you are paying tax in terms of when you go and pour fuel at the fuel station, because the fuel levies which are charged, and also you are paying tax in terms of VAT, and also you are paying tax in terms when you go and renew the license discs of the taxis. But this question is a pointed question to say how many of your members have Amritsar. The reason why this question is I am asking it is because I know a family member of mine whom could not work for the past 3 months. Fortunately, that person is not in the taxi industry, but because they worked at a formalized business, they could claim 70% of their salary back on a monthly basis. So if that person was getting about 10,000 rands a month, he could get he was getting up to 7,000 rands a month from the Unemployment Insurance Fund, which is UIF. Now, this is a benefit which could be extended to all of your taxi drivers. And the only requirement is that the business needs to be formalized and be registered as a business and as such. Now, that is the question. So how many of NTA members are registered as a business? And also, besides financial support, what other challenges are there? I think also one other issue which perhaps maybe the president has touched on briefly is what is the NTA stance on the issue of going ahead with 100% besides the government directive not to do so? Because we've seen some of the taxi associations across the country. Some of them have taken a stance of loading full capacity. Some have not taken a stance not to do so. And what is the stance of NTA as far as those that decided to not to respect the government directive? Are there any discussions that we're going to be having with some of the member associations? And if yes, what are the consequences? If you have, what is it that have come out of those discussions of those that defied the government instruction? You know, I think the president spoke about, I think this is a question which was asked by my colleague, Chris Ansel. Is there any other studies or stakeholders that NTA has consulted besides the stated World Health Organization document? Besides that document, is there anything else that you relied upon for you to come to a decision that you need to load full capacity? Now, this other question is, as NTA, do you receive any financial support from the Department of Transport? If yes, how is this spent? How is this money utilized from the Department of Transport? What do you use this money for? Does it go to your overhead costs? What is it that you do with it? And also, when was the last time you received such financial support from the Department of Transport? The other question is, the NTA, do you enjoy any support in terms of applications for new taxi operators licenses from the Department of Transport? The reason I'm asking this question is because we did an oversight in Gauteng, went to about 4 major taxi ranks. One of the things that came up was that many taxi operators are still waiting for the operator's license. If yes, has there been any engagement with the Department of Transport as far as that is concerned? And what came out of those engagements? What were there any commitments that the department made to you in as far as speeding up the process of new taxi operators getting the taxi operators licenses? And if not, what is the backlog of taxi operators that are still waiting for licenses? Because many taxi operators are operating with receipts that they received when they went to apply for an operator's license when they were paying that fee. But an operator's license is still not inside. Has there been any engagement with the department? If yes, what came out of it? If not, then we can also look at that. And then other challenges that we came about when we did the oversight was the issues of the taxi board. We are aware that the taxi boards are continuing to abuse and exploit the taxi industry. One, taxi operators can't get licenses. And when you don't have a license, they stop you. Where is your operator's license? You don't have it. Taxi drivers are expected to pay bribes for them to be continuously working on our road. Now, there are many instances which are cited as the taxi board actually blocking routes which are profitable and knowing very well that taxi operators will have to either use an alternative route or they'll have to brave and go and pay a bribe there. What other abuses are you getting in as far as that is concerned? Because we are the portfolio committee. We are our role is that of oversight. We are not government, but government, the Department of Transport comes to us and accounts to us. So when you give us these replies, we will definitely have to canvass these replies with the Department of Transport. But it will be difficult for us to do so if we don't have these answers from the horse's mouth. Now, also, how often does the NTA or the member association do you test your members in terms of the COVID-19 tests? Because when we went on oversight, and we need to applaud you because many of your member associations, many of the taxi drivers were keeping to the regulations of wearing a mask, and many of your marshals were sanitizing commuters as they were coming into the taxis. And I think that is something that we need to applaud, and that you are actually doing a lot to ensure that you protect the commuters. But how often do you test your drivers if they test at all. And I think I've already canvassed the issue of UIF claims, where the taxi drivers can benefit from claiming from the unemployment insurance fund because all the taxis were parked. Now, I think Honorable McDonald has already asked this question to say how many masks have you received from the department, if any at all. And also, just lastly, my last question is the taxi recapitalization program within the NTA. What is the uptake? Are any of your member associations participating in that program? If yes, how many? Because what we heard was that there was a huge resistance and pushback from the taxi industry, which what was cited was that the 120,000 rands that you would get if your taxi was to be scrapped was too little. And what came up was that you guys are saying that a new Kumbi is about 500,000 rands, 600,000 rands, and if you take all that money, you put it into a deposit, you will remain with a debt over the next 5 years. And whereas the other old scrap Kumbi was actually paid off. But what is the uptake within your member associations generally? What is the feeling about the tax recap program from the DOT? I think, Chairperson, for now I will stop there. Hopefully, we will have opportunity for follow-up questions. And just to add, lastly, Chair, to say we respect the tax industry and we are fully behind you, and we thank you for the service that you continuously do, and we hope that you will continue to keep all commuters and South Africans safe.
Thank you, Masibongeke Mhlonishwa. Ungasaphindi uthi ngikubize ngomphathiso. Honorable Noluchungu.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by thanking the presentation from NTA and their willingness to engage with us. I only hope that this is not the last time that we engage with them. We have a lot of questions. There are a lot of things that we need clarity on. And as the stakeholder, I think it is important for us to continue these engagements. I'm listening. There are a lot of things that we still need to understand, but we do not have enough time to dwell on that tonight.
May I see your face, please?
Can I ask you not to? Okay, thank you. We cannot run away from the fact that the 100% loading capacity that you are requesting will definitely increase the number of infections. There is no running away from that. But maybe we need to find other means of compensating the taxi industry. And I believe that rests on the leadership of the taxi industries, that is Santago and NTA. One of my colleagues here has touched on formalization of the taxi industries. This is something that we're discussing in this portfolio committee. And by now, this should have been driven by the leadership of the taxi industry. You know what? COVID-19 has exposed a lot of abnormalities in South Africa that we need to deal with. And one of those is the issue of subsidy. Given your market share as the taxi industry, a market share of 70%, you are the only public transport system that is not being subsidized. And I think this is an opportunity for the leadership to engage the government on that. One, on the formalization of the taxi industry. Two, the subsidy for all modes of transport, especially that you are the ones that are transporting the majority of South Africans. I want to propose that you must initiate the talks with the government in terms of the subsidy, and you must present a model to them. How is it that you want to be done? Because currently, the way it is done, I'm talking now, converting the taxis, into formal business through BRT. I know there's been a lot of resistance, and it is something that has been prescribed to you. Hence, there was a lot of resistance in terms of that model. So this is an opportunity for you to put together a proposal and present it to the government, and not focus only on the relief fund just for COVID-19. If one can look at the billions that have been lost in this country due to corruption, that money could have been easily diverted into the subsidy for the taxi industry. So I'm appealing to you not to look at this challenge, in isolation just as COVID-19. Look at the bigger picture. Use this opportunity to engage with the government and look forward as to what is it that we can do to formalize the industry and a subsidy. Because as it is now, you only you wait for the fire and you will put a stop into that, and instead of saying this is the plan. In one meeting, I was the one who raised the issue of Santago not being innovative. You look at Uber, that should have been your initiative. You have somebody sitting in America getting money from South Africa, whereas that should have been Santago saying, how do we improve the taxi industry? There is no way that you can sit there and just fighting fights that are not going to take you anywhere. You need to look beyond the small fights and build a future for the taxi industry, because this is the only business that was started by the Black people on their own without any government assistance. And therefore, you must fight for a better taxi industry that will take over most of this public transport. Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you very much. On that note, Honorable Noluchungu, Honorable Ramadwa Ndimadegwa.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, for the opportunity. Allow me to greet the President and the team. And also, I would like to join honorable members who are appreciating the presentation by the President. Chairperson, when the President was presenting, he indicated that he had discussions with the minister and on various matters. Can he detail or give us details on the matters that he didn't mention when presenting, that he discussed, they discussed as an industry with the minister? I'm saying this because he just said there were various matters that they engaged with the minister. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. That's my submission.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Member. President. Is the President and the team still here?
Yebo, Nkosi yami.
Yebo, sisasekhona.
President, I hope we have done justice to your request, that we should be honest, frank, and try to find a way going forward. This is our 2-cent contribution to this matter. Some of the issues raised by honorable members were in fact questions. Others were requesting you to give us more information, as when we engage with the department, we will be empowered not to represent our own jackets, but represent stakeholders that we need to represent. So I take this opportunity, President, to come back to you for your comments, where you need to give us more information and you are able to do. You are at your hands. The opportunity is yours. The time is yours.
Thank you so much, Slalo. May I express my gratitude for the audience we received tonight and appreciate comments made by honorable members and acknowledgements made. I have to respond, and I think I am going to start it from the comments made by Honorable Ramadwa. I think in my remarks, I indicated that the first time that we met with the minister was after COVID-19. Before that, he had been very elusive. And I have also indicated that since then, we have narrowed the gap and that he has come very close to us in dealing with especially the COVID-19 issues. So there are, of course, other matters that we have been discussing with different ministers from time immemorial, meaning that from the advent of your tax recapitalization until now, the issues that are facing the taxi industry, we have not received any receptive audience since the first minister to date. I have to admit that this new minister seems to be quite energetic and interested, and our willingness to engage him grows by day. We were supposed to have met initially physically, but the lockdown prevented all of that. So our meetings have always been virtual, like we are meeting tonight. So not much has been discussed other than matters related to the present situation. And of course, a promise that sooner there will be a text in Daba where the formalization will be discussed, and we have appreciated that very much. So formalization of the taxi industry is what we have been yearning for. Our willingness to participate and engage has over the years not been reciprocated. Nobody, not a single minister, before Minister Mbalula demonstrated an intent and a willingness to truly engage on this subject. I need to remind your good selves that the taxi industry, through the design of the apartheid government and the Minister of Transport then, decided to deregulate the industry and created this informal situation that we find ourselves in. It is indeed a very black mark, painful as it is, on us that during the lifespan of our democracy, we have not been able to make any headway on the subject matter. We want formalization of the taxi industry as early as yesterday. That is where the NTA stands, as early as yesterday. And we are more than willing to engage on these issues. Some of the issues on formalization that we have engaged with the previous ministers is about the operating licenses. The operating license is a permit, and the permission to operate is not a business license, and it carries no business value. It is our intent to have the permits we have transformed into business licenses with value, so that as and when we would want to alienate and bow out of business, the people who are going to buy our businesses are also going to buy for the goodwill that we have created over the years. So a permission slip to operate is not a business license. So that is one aspect of formalization that we have to engage the department on. Secondly, the registration of drivers and so on and so forth is then a formality. After all is said and done, we are more than willing to do and to comply with any statute and law governing this country. Like I have said initially, we are not anarchists. Secondly, I need to indicate that, yes, it is true that there are taxi operators and drivers who are loading 100%. But when that was brought to our attention, we sent out an advisory to all our structures to convey the message that we have not declared a dispute with the minister, and we have not called them to go on strike and to defy the laws of the country. That we have done. And insofar as how many of us have registered their businesses, I have not engaged in this research. I have not done any research on the members who have registered and or not. However, like I indicated, our overtures were not reciprocated by the ministers over the years, hence the present state. When I first spoke to the minister, Fikile Mbalula, National Minister of Transport, I said, thanks to COVID-19, Mhlekazi, ndake ndawuthola. Had it not been of COVID-19, maybe, just maybe, we wouldn't have met to date. But thanks to COVID-19, we met, and we have since established a rapport. And I am able to call him at any given time when there are issues that I need to share with him. Moving forward, I need to emphasize the fact that the National Taxi Alliance has not received a single cent from the National Department of Transport as support. The 25 million rand, we do not know anything about it. The NTA to date has not received a single cent from the National Department of Transport as public transport support. Maybe, just maybe, if you could inquire where the money is landed, that is where you will receive answers as to the appropriation of those monies. The NTA under my watch is possibly the black sheep of the family. Hence, it is not receiving anything. And this demonstrates the distance that I have just spoken of between the ministers, different ministers, up until now. So I move on to the illegal conversion of panel vans. This is something that the banks engaged in and were allowed by government and everybody in order to siphon off huge sums of money from our ignorant clients. The conversions were done by banks, and we are glad that the manufacturers disowned that process. They declared it illegal, and it was done without their consent. However, after all the engagements were done, every indication and everything that was expected of us after the intervention of others, including your good selves, we did advise our members to go through the motions, and as you had advised, for them to have their vehicles cleared. So that is it. Another aspect that I am going to deal with is the abuse by the operating licensing boards. They have such unfettered power, such that they are a law unto themselves. If we were to document, which I believe we have to, our respective structures in every province, to submit a document and documents to this effect, I will definitely be doing precisely that, and sooner or later, those will be landing on your desk. I can promise that, because it now is very clear to us that in the portfolio committee, we have a partner interested in righting the wrongs of the past and the abuses within the system. And I do need to mention that this form of abuse has resulted in multiple deaths of people and operators because some routes were invaded because of the favors received to some people from the operating licensing boards. Yes, COVID-19 testing on drivers and how often. This is one aspect that we dealt with the two-person ministerial committee, which we met in order to mitigate against the spread of COVID-19. The protocols and systems and their structure have been put forward. And of course, the advisory council, through the assistance of Professor Karim and others, are helping in coming up with these measures and protocols. I'm sure you will appreciate that taxi operators are neither engineers, nor physicians, nor mathematicians. We are not doctors. The little knowledge we have is the little knowledge that they have provided us. Yes, there are taxi operators, many of them, operating using receipts. And of course, by law, they are illegal operators. But such receipts are are available in all provinces. Some for years. If all of these could be put into a single document to enable you to look through and to engage the department in, I think that suggestion would be helpful, and we are very appreciative of the suggestion. On the 100% loading capacity, we had stated it very clearly and in no uncertain terms that this, if not met, means the death of the taxi industry. Our initial suggestion was that we are more than willing to continue with the 70% as prescribed under COVID-19 regulations. However, the shortfall government should subsidize, as the honorable member suggests. Then we met a brick wall. The answer was no. Government does not have money. There are no funds available. So what else can we do? Then we said, our proposals therefore remains a 70% in the absence of any subsidy to the shortfall, 30% shortfall. So then we looked at how this can be done, what research suggests could be done. Some of those we agreed, and Professor Karim agreed, are not practical solutions. And I must admit that we are not being unreasonable. But if we were to carry on for the next 5-7 years, carrying 70%, what profit will be there to pay for the installments? What will we then be able to put on the table for our kids? What will then be there to pay for the drivers? I'm sure the situation suggests it cannot be. It is just not sustainable. It can't be done. And it cannot continue as is. So we need to find a way out. I am very appreciative of the comments made by the honorable member that we need to look at a subsidy. However, like I said, on our side, COVID-19 for the first time made it possible for us to truly engage ministers. The previous ministers we have had, we have marched, presented memoranda of grievances, nothing ever happened. Not a single one of them ever took anything forward and to heart. So they have been entertained by the marches we have engaged in and turned us into fools. So to honorable members, I need to emphasize that the regular washing of hands, regular sanitization of vehicles, social distancing, all of these measures are spoken not only by the president, not only by the ministers, not only by leaders and members of the World Health Organization. When I quoted them, I meant to say that this is what they say, that in areas and situations where it is hard and difficult for people to social distance, then let them wear masks. That is why I am obliged to wear a mask the moment I move out of my gate, because the possibility outside is greater that I may either infect or be infected. Of course, in our shops, in our malls, we go past one another. Sometimes we pick up items on the same rack without social distancing. So social distancing is only practical in situations that are formal. You will appreciate that even today, some of the churches that declared they are going to social distance are being closed today because they simply cannot afford that. So this is what we have brought to bear, so that something, a middle ground of some sort, could be found. Honorable members, if government could subsidize the 30% shortfall in our loading capacity, we would be more than willing to continue carrying the 70% without any threat to the existence of the business. So we came forward to government to plead with government. And when government pleaded poverty, then we said, how then about reverting to the 100%? Try and look at mitigating factors. You have mentioned wearing of masks, regular sanitization, and so on and so forth. This came from you. If this messaging was wrong, then tell us to stop preaching the message to our members, because these are measures that are not effective. If they assist, then something else should be done. So that advisory committee, together with us, shared ideas on some of these things. We are not prescriptive, as we have no authority to prescribe. We only present. Like I said, I cannot pronounce on what I don't have. But the understanding that we have and rapport suggests something can be done. I am glad that honorable members see things differently from what has always been the case. So the subsidization of the taxi industry, the formalization of the taxi industry is a matter that is very pertinent and very close to our hearts. Like I said, not a single minister before Ubabufigile Mbalula showed any interest in these matters. We have always wanted to engage, and the regularity of our marches and so on and so forth are demonstrative of that. On the taxi fares, I need to admit that we at national level do not regulate the fares. The fares are agreed at operational level at different areas, influenced by different situations. And as a result, the fares are not uniform. So what has been agreed to as a way forward in this case is that you don't raise fares unless all of you operating in that line and route are in agreement in order to prevent conflict, unnecessary deaths, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure you will appreciate, as the petrol price goes up and down, the taxi industry does not increase fares in that manner. Of course, we are aware that sometimes during the core of COVID-19, your level 5, there are drivers who increased their fares, who demanded from passengers to fill the gap, that is, to pay for the 30% shortfall. But we are against that, and we have advised that to our members that the procedure and the processes are that the situation is temporary. At some stage, they will be able to load the 100%. And of course, as we go further and deeper into the present situation, of course, where COVID-19 is escalating, not as a result of our taxi operations, of course, but primarily as a result of our laissez-faire attitude as citizens towards the prescriptions by government to social distance, to wear masks, to regularly sanitize, and to not engage in groups. We are aware people are defying those. And in some cases, we are also aware that in some areas, even those staff members and officials appointed to help assist your track and trace met violent rejections and so on and so forth. However, intransigence is going to lead to this epidemic increasing in our country. And I am mindful of the fact that one moment of indiscretion could be very costly. I have been speaking to my kids today about the MEC in Northwest who has passed on. And I was also shocked to see and realize that the Premier is also infected and some other MECs. So this goes to demonstrate that your COVID-19 is here and is serious and deadly and highly contagious. So we are appealing that the message we send out must be very realistic and consistent. When we say social distancing, regular sanitization and the washing of hands serves and the wearing of masks helps. We must be saying it, but not in folk tongue. We can't say at one moment they do help mitigate against this infection, and at another, we suggest they do not. So mixed messaging in this case is not going to be very helpful. And I think in a nutshell, there are, yes, PPEs that we have received from government. I am unable to quantify, maybe the General Secretary will assist. And of course, to our partners in your SA Taxi, your Toyota South Africa, and others. So all in all, we are prepared to listen, to engage, and to move forward. And finally, in my concluding remarks, I did say to the minister, and let me repeat them to members, honorable members of the Portfolio Committee. One, if you want to walk fast, you must walk alone. But if you want to walk far, far into the future, let us together hold hands and eat the field. Together, we will arrive. Thank you very much. I am not running away. Chairman, nature calls. Dala, nature calls. I need to respond very urgently. Thank you very much. We are tetele.
Sengikutetele baba ngaba ngiziphuthele kabi.
Okay.
Yeah, sengikutetele. Thank you very much, honorable members, for the engagements. And the National Taxi Alliance members who are with us this evening. I would want to take this meeting to its logical conclusion. And I'm sure we all agree that this meeting has been fruitful. We have been highlighted on a number of issues that if we did not meet with the National Taxi Alliance, wouldn't know them. The same goes for NTA. They now know our views. We stand ready to help them because this is one stakeholder we are supposed to work with and will work with moving forward. I know that members had expected that we'll also be talking to Santaco. I must say that their response was not positive for this evening, but we'll go back and insist that we think it is only correct and fair.
Chairperson, may I be recognized before you conclude?
Okay. Secretary?
Yes, Chairperson.
Okay.
Yeah. My apologies for interrupting, but just three things I needed to mop up, which I think are very important to assist going forward, if you allow.
No, it's okay.
Thank you.
Mop up, Secretary, it's okay.
Right. The first thing is the issue of formalization of the taxi industry, of which the President has presented it very well. However, what is left is that our own government at a particular time legislated the regulation and control of the taxi industry, just to bring in some semblance of control and formality into the taxi industry. You would appreciate that every taxi association in the country is registered with a provincial registrar. Under that association, there are routes registered under that taxi association, and on those routes operate taxi operators that are registered, and that database sits with every provincial regulatory entities we call PRIs. Now, this COVID-19 found us in that kind of formality, which was introduced to the industry by government. It would not be correct to say, in that regard, the taxi industry is not formal. We agree to that formalization process, and government, through that intervention, spent a lot of resources. Hence, our operating entities are called taxi association and taxi routes, which are registered. We appreciate the fact that then we have to migrate to a situation where the taxi industry would be like any other company, but you will also understand that it's a lot of companies under one roof. Now, the minister has committed to a taxi indaba once we get to level 1. Now, before we get to level 1, it is not fair to the taxi industry to say, if you want to access relief, you must present yourself as a company. because this COVID-19 found us the way we are, with that semblance of formality in terms of the regulation and control registration. Now, at the taxi indaba, definitely, as the president has indicated, we are going to accept total formalization of the taxi industry, of course, taking into consideration the advices that would have gotten from the experts. We are already engaging with experts so that when we get to the taxi indaba, we are armed and our decisions are well informed. You would find that in the taxi association, my operating license, it would reflect which association I operate under. Now, number two, just to add on the issue of the 70% loading capacity, the honorable members will appreciate the pressure that we were under as leadership when the minister had to postpone a number of meetings. And we can appreciate also the pressure he was under, because he could not come and feed back to us when the NCCC had not pronounced on certain issues that we had requested government consider. Now, as the leadership of the taxi industry, the president has indicated that we were not defying government. We wouldn't dare defy government. But from the pressure that we're getting from our members, certain pronouncements were made, and we have to honor those pronouncements. But because it was through pressure. Now, you will appreciate that the taxi industry is not charging market-related fares. Really, we are subsidizing the commuting public. Now, that says, if we lose just one passenger, we are not making a profit. Loading at 70% capacity, we are not even breaking even. We can do the maths, they will show you how that thing works. Now, the payment holidays are over that were granted by some financial institutions, April, May, June. Now we are in July, banks are expecting our members to pay their installments. Yet taxis stopped operating from the 27th of March 2020. Most of these taxis are going to be repossessed because we are still sitting at 70% and not making a profit. Now, experts predict that it appears this COVID-19 is going to be with us for some time. So therefore, the pleading that we've been making is to say we have to find a rationality in balancing the COVID-19 cap, and of course, freedom of trade and occupation is very important to avoid a future where majority citizens becomes charity cases to the state, because that's what we're angling at as the taxi industry. It will take a little bit of time, even up to 6 months or even a year for the taxi industry to recover. Hence, we say to government, yes, thank you very much for considering us on the relief fund, but it hardly touches the surface. Now, we don't want to be seen, as the president has already indicated, I'm not repeating, but I'm showing another angle, as people who are defying the state. But you will appreciate that some of the COVID-19 regulations have not been beyond scrutiny. There are examples for that. It is said by experts that COVID-19 affects people of a certain age in the main and not the others. But when these regulations are made, sometimes they are blanket. The other good example to that is that the coronavirus came into the country via aeroplanes. yet aeroplanes are now allowed to operate at full capacity and not the taxi industry. We are not even criticizing the regulations. They are necessary for us to stay alive, but we're just showing that because this thing caught everybody off guard, there would be inconsistencies that are not intended. Now, the issue of the taxi recapitalization and panel vans. When you go to scrap your taxi, you are expected to produce an operating license that is valid. Valid means it must still be current. Most taxi operators who had bought these illegal panel vans, and by the way, those panel vans were licensed by the state to be on the road and also to operate as taxis. When it was discovered that they are not safe, we agreed with the government to say, no, we cannot be operating vehicles that are not safe. But then what do we do? We agreed that those taxis should be scrapped, and the owners or the operators should receive a scrapping allowance. But by the time that decision was made, those taxis were already a year or more off the road. Therefore, they did not have 1 license to be on the road, 2 operating licenses. They couldn't scrap them. If there is a project that dismally failed the government, it is the tax recapitalization program. It really failed the government. And we have made a presentation in that regard to the previous portfolio committee. As the president has said, we didn't receive any joy out of that. So there are a lot of those panel vans that are parked, and those our members don't know what to do with them because they can't get operating licenses to go and scrap. Now, you as the lawmakers in your interaction with the Department of Transport, maybe you can assist in that regard. Finally, don't forget that as lawmakers, you are balancing a lot of laws and a lot of intervention to the citizens of our country. One of them is that us as Black people, we haven't been favored mainly by many economic laws. Why I'm raising this issue is based on the e-hailing. At a particular time, the apartheid government deregulated the taxi industry. At the time, the Minister of Transport was Dr. Velgemoot. That process plunged the taxi industry into the current chaos where you see taxi people are killing each other like mad people. It started with that deregulation. Now, e-hailing is landing in this country. We have meter taxis, and I'm not speaking for meter taxis, but they are another mode of transport in the country, which really operate more or less the same with e-hailing. The only difference is that the others use an app, the other use a meter, but the same number of capacity and so on. Now, if you allow e-hailing to continue the way it is doing, and I know there is a bill that needs to be signed into law, you are deregulating public transport in this country. Because before you say Jack Robinson, as soon as they are regulated, they have operating license, the next thing they will be in court saying, no, government, if people send us a message through the app to say, here we are 15, we want you to come and pick us up. Why is government not allowing us to pick them up using a 15-seater? I can tell you now, we've seen some judgments made by our courts, and I'm not criticizing the judiciary. Some things will be declared unconstitutional, and our Department of Transport will be forced by courts to grant e-hailing a 15-seater capacity, 65-seater capacity. When you do that, the taxi industry has absorbed so many people who would be unemployable in many sectors. If you take that taxi away, those people, their families, and the generations after them will be charity to the state, and the state won't afford that. So we rather be very careful when we are embracing some of these concepts that come from overseas, because you may be taking bread away from your own people in the name of development. Because to us, a person who can afford Uber and so on and so forth are people in a certain economic bracket, and not everybody. So I thought I should just map up those which I thought were left after a wonderful presentation by our president. Ngiyabonga Mangete neteam.
Mangete, the last one from Treasurer.
Oh, I thought you had formulated a principle, but it's okay. Let me start with my former principle.
Okay. Oh yes.
Yeah.
My question. How it can happen that 25 million tax money not being accountable? 25 million, you doesn't know that where you give it to. I am the treasurer of National Taxi Alliance. I don't know any cent from those money. So we need accountability on this money. Thank you.
You are talking like
I think point of correction. It's 25 billion, not million.
Who said 25 billion?
Somebody was talking about 25
million, not billion.
Not
the
billion.
treasurers, yeah. No, the treasurer is correct, not billion. Million.
My record is treasurer 25 million.
Yeah, million.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
And then SG, you didn't, sorry, Chairperson. SG, you didn't mention the non-receival of PPEs at Northwest Province by the NTA. Thank you.
Okay.
Our apologies, Chairperson. Yeah, it is covered by the presentation by the president of the NTA when he said ministers and other government officials, since the arrival of Minister Mbalula in the Department of Transport, are beginning to warm up to the NTA members nationally, because there are some people who forgot to read the constitution of our country in the Bill of Rights where it speaks about freedom of association. So there are some provinces that are still resisting interaction or listening to NTA members. And unfortunately, the gentleman who just spoke here, our Deputy General Secretary, comes from Northwest, is also the chairperson of the province. We are having challenges there where people even refuse to provide PPEs to taxi ranks and routes that are controlled by the National Taxi Alliance. Those people need to be called to order, because we think what they are doing is unconstitutional. We have government for everybody, and we think there is a very strong case in instances like that for one or two of the Chapter 9 institutions, particularly the Public Protector or the Human Rights Commission, because you can't just leave people to die when government is expected to protect the lives of our people. So it's an issue that we have taken up with the department, and they've been taking up with the province, but it's fine. We will see how it goes. As the president indicated, we reserve the right to seek other means of making corrections on those issues. Thank you.
Okay. Is President back? President,
Yes.
are you back?
William was here.
Oh,
William finished. Thank you.
I was about to summarize and take the meeting into its logical conclusion.
Chair, can I just abuse you as well? I think there was a question which was not responded to by the president. I think he responded in part, but not to what I had asked. I had asked, what is the uptake on the taxi recap by the NTA? I think when the President Francis was answering, he answered in the fashion of the panel vans, saying that the panel vans which were illegally converted and that they didn't have operators licenses, and therefore there was an agreement that they would be scrapped and then they would get 100 but my question specifically was, what is the uptake of the taxi recap by the NTA member associations? How receptive are they to the taxi recap? And how, obviously they won't have the figures maybe at the top of their head, but maybe if they can just give me or give us an indication as to are many of their members coming on board on the taxi recap outside of the panel vans, but just your normal taxis which are operating on the road?
Okay. President, do you want to say something around that?
Can I afford the General Secretary an opportunity to deal with that? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, President. General Secretary.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. At the initial stage of the tax recapitalization program, we went against certain things and our members held back. But in the realization that it was for the first time in the history of our country where the minibus taxi industry was granted an assistance of 7.7 billion, which was really unprecedented. We realized that we had to meet the government somewhere. But that project, as I said, it was a dismal affair. It was hijacked and used for other interests other than what it was supposed to be for. As we speak now, many of our members have registered to scrap those taxes. But some of those applications have not been finalized because those who have registered, they don't have operating licenses to present. We even suggested to government to say, we want to take off these old taxis that are not safe on the road. Please instruct your provincial regulatory entities, the boards that issue those operating licenses, to just issue an operating license for scrapping only, where the operator will not go and operate using that for scrapping only. And that has not happened. Let me tell you a very sad story. I stopped one of my taxis, it's about a year ago now. Not as Korokor, a Quantum. After stopping it, I registered, I submitted all the documents and everything. They said, okay, fine, park the taxi, we'll tell you when to come and scrap it. Guess what? I'm still waiting now. And the sources have stripped the taxi. It's a shell now. I don't know what I'm going to do when they come to me and say, now we are ready to bring the taxi. I won't even be able to drive it. So it's many operators that are in that situation. What went wrong with that good gesture from our government, which is unprecedented, and we appreciate it, it was hijacked. And ministers and other people in government did not want to listen to the taxi industry. Do we want it to continue? Yes, but it must be changed so that it's accountable. They were scraping proceeds. Remember, when a taxi gets crushed, then they sell the metal and the rubbers and so on. That money was supposed to benefit the taxi industry. We haven't seen a cent out of it. That's tax recapitalization to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Maybe
you,
in
honorable
addition,
members. I think I think that point is clear. I
okay.
think that point is clear. I think let me take this opportunity. I can see we're warming up, and just say we have learned a lot from this engagement. I should also, on behalf of the committee, appreciate the professionalism with which you carried yourself in terms of presenting your own issues. But maybe plead with you that you need to take yourself forward, of course, with the help of government. This industry must transform. Like any other industry started by anybody, whether black or white, we must be able to develop with times. And I think as a committee, we are warm to that idea that this industry should stop fighting, concentrate on what will assist it to make money on. We will go back and engage with the department, with the information we have. We have heard you on the issues of panel vans. You'll remember that it is us who asked that question because we have interest. We want to deal with this issue and find a proper closure on it. It is on our agenda as a committee. We welcome the news that you are going to have in Daba and deal with the matters and formalize this industry. I'm sure it's not going to be an easy process, but it's a necessary process. And from time to time, where there's a need, we'll come in and say, we are here, where can we assist? And from time to time, where we are happy in terms of your engagements with the minister and the department, we'll also issue a statement of support and say you are on the right track. Please continue. I'm sure we have not exhausted everything as you would have wanted and on our side too. But we are pleased to hear that as much as you are faced with these challenges that are facing you, you are law-abiding citizen. You are giving a space for government to try and lead. Where you are not happy, you are raising your issues properly. I think that is what we should appreciate about this meeting. Because most of the time when you talk about this industry, a particular perception is created. We will endeavor to meet with you whenever a need arises. I want just to put my weight as everybody else that we are sympathetic, we are supportive to this industry, like all the industries that we work with, and we want to see this industry growing. We'd actually want a situation where you yourselves, out of your own ideas are now operating in Africa, are now operating globally from our own shores. Companies like Sasolburg and many others have shown that South Africa can also be able to operate in other countries. I think with good researchers, good plans, this industry also can be able to do that. Wherever there is business, we should be able to assist you to get to that level. Let me take this opportunity request you to continue engaging with government. We'll also engage department from our side. We have heard your story, and we appreciate the fact that you came prepared, honored our invitation. We are humbled by that. We are humbled by that. Do honor invitations as we invite you, because one day it will be you who needs us when we have not called you. We'll open our doors for you and hear you out, because we are here to serve our people. We are here to serve our stakeholders. By those words, let me bring this meeting to its logical conclusion, and thank you, President, with your team. And thanks all the members who have braved this cold winter evening to have this fruitful engagement. Thank you very much. The meeting is closed. Masithokozeni, bahlonishwa.
Long live the chairperson.
Siyabonga, siyabonga, Mangesh.
Siyabonga.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Long live the chairperson.
All right.
Thank you.
Long live everybody.
Yes,
Long live.
Mpanza.
Nilaleka.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Kushabangu.
Asikakala.
Kushabangu.
Yeah.